Ethel, I like your hair.
Hi. Hi there.
It's good. It looks good.
I can't hear. Are we hearing everybody?
Yep.
Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
We can hear you.
Hi there. I can't hear Richard.
Hi, Ethel.
Can you hear us
Hey.
now, Ethel?
Mark, can we hear? I can't hear you. What's happening with
It's not here. Maybe you want to log out and try again.
Mark?
Check the mute button.
Is off over 14
No,
feet.
she's not muted, so.
Oh,
To jack up the whole flooring system. This could be about a week to correct this.
Corey's being very optimistic when he says a week.
I'm hoping it's only a week.
That's a dirty lie.
It is a dirty lie.
Let me know what they say.
All right. See ya. Bye. You did that really well.
I know, right? See how calm she is?
Yeah. That was surprising.
Weird. I feel like we leave now.
Yeah, she
Well, we're
knows.
not in trouble.
Who are we hearing?
I don't know.
I should log out? Okay.
So, while Corey's working on shoring out the townhouse,
Did people see that the Park 79 Hotel is going to be converted into residences for low-income seniors?
Yeah, we've known that for a while, actually.
Oh, I just
Um,
saw it.
Yeah, it's on my block, actually. Remember,
Yeah.
we saw that in preservation a few months ago because they needed to put in an ADA accessible lift because they couldn't have room for a ramp.
We
And-
also, Mark, we also heard about it over a year ago because Mark Jennings
Hi.
told us on the senior task
I
force.
don't know. I can't hear everybody.
Uh-oh. I don't know what to say, Ethel. Ethel, do you have a, no.
Ethel, unmute.
She
No,
is.
she's not- She's
She
on,
is unmuted.
Roberta, can't hear Roberta.
we are live streaming, by the way. And recording.
Oh, God.
Well, by the way, on the
Ethel?
79th Street building, I think it would be worth our while to get in touch with the owners and see if we can get some insight into how they finance this project. I saw that in the Cranes article that they got a huge tax benefit, and we ought to know about that sort of thing for future reference.
Right.
I'm happy to talk to Project Find and they can explain it to me. And I'll
Okay.
get back.
That'd be great. We're going to
Is
be,
I'm sorry, is anyone speaking?
yes.
But I can't hear you. What is wrong?
Ethel, do you have
I
earbuds?
feel awful.
Hold on.
Ethel, do you have earbuds? This is what I use. Like this. It can
Mark,
plug into your
Mark, can
computer.
you help?
No, it's not me.
Hello?
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're just ignoring you.
Yeah.
Well, listen, which project were you looking to find out about financing on? I entered that conversation.
The one on some, that Project Find is gonna manage,
The one on what?
79th Street.
Oh, yes. Okay.
The
Between
Park
Columbus and that.
79 Hotel.
Got it.
How many people are we?
There's a list here.
Oh,
Me, Mark, Louisa, Melissa, Peter, Roberta, Doug, Ethel, and Seema. But Ethel is under handicap because she can't hear anything.
And she's gone.
Yeah, I'm going to send her a different link and see if that does anything.
All right. Her sound may be off on the computer, you know.
it may be on a computer, you know?
Oh, we'll see. But we needed her for the first part of the agenda.
Wait, is there an agenda? Can you resend it? Or is it just online?
I thought it was sent.
There's no agenda on our website.
Oh,
There was, Penny sent a
Yeah, Penny sent
copy
it.
of it to everybody.
oh, was it just a while ago, maybe?
Yeah, I can
No, it was
resend
a few
it.
days ago, I think.
You want me to resend it to everybody now?
Sorry, I'm just trying to see if I can find it and spare you the trouble.
No trouble.
Okay, sure then. Yeah, that'd be great.
Where's my,
I didn't get,
oh,
I said I didn't get an agenda.
You didn't? All right, let me just send it if I can find it here.
Yeah, I'm not sure I got it either. So
All right, hold on.
Oh, I think
Richard, I
found it.
found it. Do you want me to send it?
All right, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
oh,
Mark, did you send Ethel another link?
I did, yes.
You want me to call her and see if,
I'll take care of that. You go ahead with the meeting.
I think Richard's waiting to, he needs Ethel.
Well,
for-
here.
We can also move around the agenda and come back.
Yeah, let's just jump to a different item and then come back.
I can't. All right, let's go to the second item. There are a number of
Ethel
task
is on
forces.
this way.
I'm sorry?
Ethel is on.
Yes.
Is Ethel?
Yes.
Issues.
Okay. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
Thank you.
because
Thank you so much.
the first item is that Ethel has very kindly agreed to do a program on the 40-year history
Okay.
of Riverside South and Riverside
Now I
Front.
can't hear Richard.
You can't?
I'm losing my mind.
You are?
Ethel, does your computer have a?
Well, I can't hear anyone speaking.
All right.
I don't know where my,
You may have to press audio.
That would affect her.
Hello?
Hello?
I can hear you.
We hear you.
Unmute.
No, she is unmuted.
No, she's not.
No.
No, Ethel was unmuted. I muted her because I'm going to talk to her now about trying to fix the audio.
All right.
Okay. Why don't we go on to item 2?
I just
Right,
sent the
well-
agenda, so you guys should have it by now.
All right. Item 2 is one of there are a number of projects that are sort of floating around the board that are in various stages of activity. One of them is the Broadway task force. And I believe that the Broadway Task Force really should be a board task force initially, and that it should cross-fertilize between different committees that might have an interest and also different perspectives. For example, the Transportation Committee may have a different perspective from BCI. And land use also has to weigh in on this. So what I'm proposing is to try to organize a joint committee, 2 or 3 representatives from each of 3 committees to serve as the initiator of a program to develop a policy on how and if we can improve Broadway.
Richard, if I could just add to that.
Sure.
Seema, Doug and I have been on the task force, Seema
Right.
and I co-chair for, and we did have, when we set up the task force, unfortunately, it reported just to transportation, but it consisted of members of BCI, of park, of land use, and of transportation. So basically 4 committees.
All right. Well, what's the status of it?
So the 2 years ago, through transportation, DOT requested that, and if the board passed the resolution, to request DOT to do a study of what was possible on Broadway. And we did at that time, we did a walkthrough of the lower part of Broadway from 59th Street to about 72nd, 77th. Also on the Broadway Task Force is the Broadway Mall Association, people from the Broadway Mall, because that's a big part of Broadway. And so DOT came back the summer of 19 with a preliminary study that just didn't answer anything but raised a lot of questions. So they were sent back to the drawing board. And I'm assuming that because of the pandemic, they won't be coming back to the board with anything soon. But I do think it's a good idea to have reports made to all 4 of those committees.
Yeah, I think, you know, I know there's been an emphasis on transportation, which obviously is important because Broadway is an artery. But there are other issues, you know, the vacancy rate, the malls.
It hasn't been discussed. In fact, one of the things that I know, Doug, you were involved in was to do a study of all the blocks of you know, where stores were, what stores were empty. It probably has to be revised because that was done, about 2 years ago.
Well, let me suggest that
I think revising it and reinvigorating it is a great idea.
Let me suggest that Roberta, you would be obviously one representative from land use. Is there anyone else who would be?
Okay, Paige has been on it.
And what?
Paige.
Okay. Is there anyone else from land use who would be interested? If not, I'll do it. Seema. Okay, good. And let's try to coordinate Mark with the other committees, have them make sure they have representatives. And
yeah, I'm not sure that we currently have a representative from Parks. I take from Roberta that they were involved at one point, but I don't remember somebody from Parks being at the most recent meeting. I've only been
Yeah.
Yeah.
Clary came to a few meetings, but hasn't been
Okay.
there recently. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's make sure that we, as you say, reinvigorate that.
Yeah, and the meetings ought to be, you know, there ought to be reports back to the various committees of what's going on and how it's progressing.
When I was chair of the board, there were minutes and there were reports back, but I think since I haven't been chair, I don't think the committee has been, the task force has been good about minutes.
All right, well, let's, you know, let's get back on it. We obviously can't wait for DOT.
No,
And I think we can do some brainstorming without their input as to what we think we want Broadway to look like and, you know, what our general objectives are. We may not all agree on that, but at least we'll have a cross-section of the board to think about it.
So
Yeah.
we've had like almost like a vision statement or a document that has been in various forms of draft. Maybe that's something that's worth circulating to land use.
I think so. Do you have it?
let's, you know what? I have a lot of that material on my computer. Why don't Seema and I pull it all together
Okay.
and we'll, with a note, and we'll send it to the 4 committees with the names of the people that are from land use, and see if other people and who else is on it, see if other people want to add. I think we had about 10 or 11 people on it. We also had a few people that aren't board members.
I also feel like it's a reflection of the work sort of that's been done to date. And so checking in to see if it's the right direction or if there's a course correction to be made is a good thing to do, I think, especially, you know, across all of those committees.
Perfect.
Yeah. No, I think Richard's frozen.
Richard, we lost you.
Yeah, Richard went to the bathroom.
We're having some Zoom issues tonight.
I'm sorry. Mark? Oh, God.
We can hear you, Ethel.
Can you hear us?
No, she's muted now.
Mark, can you unmute?
Sorry, I'm asking Ethel, I'm clicking on ask Ethel to unmute. She was unmuted for a second there.
I am now. I did that. Can
You got it. You got it. You're okay.
I apologize to everyone. For
No
this.
worries. This happens.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, Richard is now frozen or offline, but maybe, I think he was going to call on you anyway, so maybe you want to.
What would you like? Tell me. I'm very glad because we did deal with this outline. So please catch me up and I will do my part quickly.
Well, he just started to talk and then you couldn't, but he was starting to say about the project that you were going to undertake in November.
Yes. So, okay. So then I'll do that if that's okay with everyone.
Yep.
Great.
Okay. So as you can see here, I am going to prepare a set of a presentation on the development story and lessons learned of Riverside South and Riverside Center. And what I should tell you is that I already a year ago, actually September 2019, I had been invited to come and there was a planners conference, the New York Planners, Architects, and Landscape Architects, and it was a conference for the day on development in New York, big development, and they asked for a panel about talking about what have we learned from older ones, and I gave a talk on Riverside South and Riverside Center, and in the same panel, Stan Exta talked about Battery Park City. So, okay. So since then, I talked with Mark and had actually talked with the borough president previously, and most important, the Urban History Group, which many of you know, a terrific group on the Upper West Side, had asked me to do they wanted to have a presentation on Riverside South. So with Mark's help, Mark and Rich, they all contacted the Urban History Group. And so that group, the borough president and Board 7 are going to sponsor this presentation, the date being November 23rd. Now, I want to be I'm going to be updating and emphasizing the role of the community board in this, which everyone, I have to tell you, the subtext is, this is a 40-year story, literally. namely the development of the rail yards. And as many of you know, so much occurred in the 90s, but really Riverside Center really went through a whole new ULURP of Ward 7 beginning in 2009-10.
It's longer than 40 years. It's like 50 years
Yeah,
after.
you're right, Peter, because I think Peter was involved well before and was so important because there were other proposals.
The Lithographers Union,
I'm
you know.
sorry? The Topographers Union. Yes, I do have that in there because obviously this is not going to be a 2-hour presentation. It's going to be shorter. But what I am working on it now, but what I do intend to do in the next week or so, I will really consult and have 2 or 3 of you take a look at, you know, what I've prepared already and the changes I'm going to make in order to consult. Earlier, when the idea came and the Borough President Gail Brewer about a week ago, God help us, a year ago, said that this was such a great thing and she wanted to do it with the community board. And I began to talk to SEMA at the time because I thought it was just terrific to have SEMA, who is knowledgeable and knows about planning, but also didn't have the history. So we began to talk about and to select material then. So I will certainly be going back to SEMA as well as others. So, and it's very important, I want to emphasize here that the fact that a partner, history group, really is keen to do this, and you know who they are. They have done extraordinary work, and they're all the residents and others from 96th Street to 110th Street. They have an extraordinary website, and they are scholars of history. They're very keen to bring their people and audience to this, and they want it to be a broad audience. So now the date agreed upon by everybody is November 23rd. Okay, so actually it seems like a lot of time, but it won't be.
I'm leaving
So I
tomorrow.
will be consulting with you. And my last point before you may have questions is originally the idea was, especially with Riverside Center, but the idea was to also have a walking tour. In other words, the next day or before, because to really see what has been built. And perhaps I'm wrong, but many of all of us maybe do not know Riverside Center as well. And it's a completely different looking project. It's glass. It was done by Starkitects and so on. I would still love, except it's cold, to somehow maybe have some walking tour the next day or the day before for those who could come, and we'll consult with you and others if this can be done. So this is a great way to do it, and there are many people, and I think there is tremendous, and so many of us who lived it, but also so many on the board have not had the opportunity to say, what is all this? How did it happen? And how is it working out? And what didn't? And especially the battles, the precedents, and what we have learned.
Great. Ethel, just one quick correction. The date for the meeting is Wednesday, November 18th. It will take the place. That's okay. I put it in the chat. I put it in the chat. It's
from not being heard that I've made mistakes.
no worries. But it's the 18th. It'll take the place of the November Land Use Committee meeting. So we'll recommend that everybody tune into that instead.
And I'm eager for those of you who may have particular points or are interested. And I'm here.
I think this is wonderful. It's going to be a great opportunity for everybody, those who were around and had different levels of experience and those who haven't. We very rarely go back to major endeavors that the board was involved with and look at what happened and learn from the history. And I think this is a great opportunity for everybody.
I have I have a lot of drawings and photos of various models that go back into the 1960s. And,
Wow.
And then with Trump in the 70s and 80s, I have a huge collection of material on what is now Riverside South.
I also think as we're approaching thinking about future development in our district, like potentially what happens to the Silverstein project, et cetera, having a look back at what worked and what didn't and how that can help us going forward would be really valuable right now.
That is certainly the goal, but I want to again say that if we project, let's say, ideally, a 2-hour meeting maximum, because we're not going to have a presentation. We could of 2 hours. Let's say the one that we're showing is going to be, max an hour, probably less, and to have people with questions, of course. So I know and absolutely know so much of what Peter did. When I did it to begin with, I do reference the first projects and the attempts, and very quickly. But I very much welcome certainly SEMA, and I very much welcome Peter's, some of the graphics, because I'll add a quick, map with whatever that you have, and anyone else. So that's just terrific.
Great.
Anything else? Anybody have any other ideas for other panelists or other contributors or other sponsors?
Mark, do you want to remove the other Richard from the meeting?
I don't want to remove. I don't want to remove him because
what
that
happened,
might kill
my computer. My computer went off, so I had to dial back in.
But I muted him.
I've always had a split personality.
Could may I add one sentence, because I see Louisa and Melissa here, and one of the perhaps one interesting component of this long history is that the board always tried to advocate for affordable housing, as in the long struggle of Riverside South. But quickly, what was finally achieved was, it was said in the restrictive declaration, 20% or a minimum of 12%. And the result was that really it was 12, and it was by numbers of units, and it took forever. One of the interesting changes that is that Riverside Center, so many years later, the approvals that occurred were to have inclusionary housing and to do the measurement by FAR, so that that's something to look at as to the numbers of units and so on. And I'm simply highlighting that because I'm seeing the two co-chairs and what developed, and it may be something that you might want to take a look at and what was learned.
And the same quality in the affordable apartments as of the, as the luxury apartments.
Well, that's been changed in a way. It used to be units, and then it was changed to square feet. So it's a little.
That's in the ULURP that was passed 2008-9. I mean, there's about 3 or 4 chairs of the board who were involved in this long process.
At least.
At least.
Probably going back before Ludwig Galopter. When Shelley was a baby.
Yeah, he held me in his arms and rocked me.
I have all my notes from the 90s. I wasn't on the board, but I organized the tenants in the area to fight it. At one point, we had over 20 buildings who were on board.
I have some very telling recollections of Trump and his role in all this.
I don't know how many of you know, but the first project was developed by the Lithographers Union under Ed Swaduck then, and that was in the 1960s. And they called it Litho City
Yes.
Huh.
for the Lithographers Union. And I have all the drawings for every iteration, including 2 different attempts by Trump to build there, plus the Argentinians who came there in
Oh, I
19
remember.
and hired the now well-known architect Raphael Vignoli, you know, who has built many of the tallest buildings in the city. He came up from Argentina, and we worked with Vignoli on a scheme for all of the whole area from 59th Street up to 72nd Street. And I have all the drawings going back more than 50 years.
That would be so fun to see all that.
That would be great. You know, it's if you drive down or walk down from 72nd Street to 59th Street, you can see the changes in architecture and technology. And I'm sure that the ones that you have are even more primitive than the Trump towers.
Yeah.
Well, what I want you to tell you is this is such a treasure trove. I have already tried to highlight, you know, this history, but also to organize it with, you know, what have we learned? But I also want to suggest to you eventually that it may be that this treasure trove so much from the community board, and I know that I met with Roberta, you know, months ago because I knew all about the history of Lincoln Towers. And of course, but you know, this may be eventually an archive that I know the New York Historical Society has called me to separately to say they are interested in the work of the Community Board 7, you know, over the years. So perhaps there are ways to be able, you know, to contribute this important history, but to do it in an analytical way. And
I want to say,
Ethel, I have a copy of the Euler from the 90s. I'd love to get rid of it.
yes,
And
yes,
I have that paper copy. So if the Historical Society wants it, I'd love to give it to them.
yes, but also it's good to do, but you know, in what I did already, obviously, you know, in what was then a 45-minute, I summarized, you know, what was achieved in the ULURP, and I'll do, you know, do the same now. We'll keep going, but if you have, you know, original material, we'll talk about that. That's a bigger project.
I wanted to add one thing. I don't know how many of you know this fact, but we had a scheme to eliminate the highway there, and instead of having the raised highway going there, we had a scheme to have it go under Riverside Boulevard from 72nd down to 59th Street.
Right.
So it would be underground, and you wouldn't have the highway as a detriment to the west of the whole site. And there are drawings of that scheme. Only the costs were much too high, so it never was developed. But we did have drawings of it, and my partner then, a guy named Paul Willen, developed it, and he went on with it for many years, trying to get it all built.
The sequel to all that, Peter, or the backstory, if you recall, the civic groups made a deal with Trump.
Yep.
Based on the supposition that the highway would go underground.
Yeah.
In fact, I think they were going to use some of the train tracks or train tunnels.
Yeah.
But the week before, the very week before they made that deal, the governor announced that he was allocating $30 million to rehabilitate the west side, the highway where it was.
Yeah.
So it was never going to happen.
If I may suggest to you that to bring things up to date, almost, Trump.
Ethel, can you speak up a little bit? I'm having difficulty.
Yeah, you gotta get nearer the mic.
Yes, I don't know what, I tell you, I feel everything seems to be falling apart. I've been having many Zoom, I'm sorry. If this, is this any better?
No.
Okay, I'll try to do it. Anyway, the last thing to say is that as recently as the last 3 or 4 years, Trump actually said publicly how much he dislikes Jerry Nadler because he still blames Jerry Nadler for thwarting him in so many years ago and continues to feel, and actually said it in the last 4 or 5 years.
Two more little Trump anecdotes. First, I don't know how many of you remember the meeting at the public meeting at which Trump introduced his original plan.
Yes, yes.
And the original plan called for a semicircle of 6 60-story buildings surrounding a centered tower. And somebody asked him how tall the tower was going to be. And he said 150 stories, the largest building in the world. Sound familiar?
Yep.
And then, and of course, he never had any plans to do that. It was, in those days, it was even less feasible than it would be today. And then, Ethel, you mind if I tell the story about what Trump said to me?
I don't mind, I guess. I mean, who knows?
Don't give away the ending of her presentation, though.
Then had a kind of a love-hate relationship with Trump, more on the hate side. And when the then chair of the board, I think it was Hope, and I went to Trump's office to solicit funds to help us do a study of the
That was Hope
areas.
Mason, right?
Trump was very, I'm sorry?
That was Hope Mason, right?
Not Hope Mason, Hope, the other Hope. Hope
It
Cohen.
wasn't Hope Cohen, it was Hope Mason.
I don't think it was Hope Mason, but I'm not
Anyway.
sure. Anyhow, we went there. He agreed readily to give us the $50,000 we asked for, but he had one condition. He said, "You can't let Ethel Shefford have anything to do with it." And we said, "Well, we really can't do that." But we never got the money.
But what I want to tell you, I hope you can hear me, but Richard told me that when Trump became president, I've never heard it before. And now I can tell you, when I heard that, I wear it like a badge of honor.
Absolutely.
He thought I was so tough and knew me so well that he didn't want me in the room. So it's my one claim to fame. Okay.
You're in very good company with other people that Trump doesn't like.
Yeah, he once called me an idiot in sworn testimony. So I'm very proud of that.
All right, let's move on.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So Ethel, anytime, anybody has input for Ethel, feel free to put in. The third item is affordable housing, which is obviously something where we need to coordinate with the housing committee. There are land use issues and there are housing issues, and we just need to be coordinated on it. And we need to decide, we need to investigate whether there's something we can do proactively to encourage more affordable housing in the area. And that goes along, that was part of what I thought of that the 79th Street project might give us some insight into the finances of it. But I think it's worth having at least an initial meeting of a few members of our committee and a few members of housing to see what it is we think we can contribute to encourage affordable housing, additional affordable housing. And the underlying assumption is that's what we want.
Right.
I think the board's on record as wanting that, but there may be people who don't agree.
So you're talking about in new buildings as well as conversions of existing buildings?
Everything, including city housing. including NYCHA.
So
Yeah.
Rich, it's a program that gets air rights from, and I'll have to get the information to
Right.
everybody.
Yeah, but there are all kinds of programs involving.
No, but we
Yeah.
should start looking at, we should have a list.
We
of-
also, there's this mandatory inclusionary housing, which doesn't exist in our district.
I
Right.
feel like that's what
And
you
the
were
question
saying.
is, should we be proactive in seeking to have it imposed on our district?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's potential for soft sites farther south in our district where, I'm sure a contextual rezoning that triggered MIH could make many people happy. I don't know. It's something to think about if there are sites we can identify or like a district.
Yeah. Actually, I think it will make many people unhappy since it provides very tall buildings in order to accommodate the affordable housing.
I mean,
But
what's
I
very
think it's
tall?
worth looking at it.
It's
Yeah.
not as it doesn't have the same effect as it did in the neighborhoods in Brooklyn and Queens where it was imposed originally, where you had very low rise zoning. I think the increment here would be, there'd be an increment, but it wouldn't be enormous.
Be different.
Okay,
Okay, it'd be very interesting to watch Soho because de Blasio has just proposed it for Soho.
Yes.
Right. And
Yes,
just
Which
we
will
ought
be
to look at
interesting
that.
to watch. Also because my understanding is one of the problems about the Bronx and where it was proposed before in Inwood where it got beaten down is that it was proposed for primarily low-income housing. I'm sorry, low-income neighborhoods. So watching Soho will give us an idea how it might be accepted here.
Yeah, just
There's
to elevate-
already substantial opposition to it, so.
I know.
I would not count it out. I think that there's a lot of desire to see wealthy neighborhoods rezoned for more housing, especially affordable housing.
I would hope so.
Oh, I think there is.
You
But
know,
I
there is
also
that
was
Andrew
reading.
And it's the
Jones
only
bill.
way, I mean, people complain last night, people were complaining about homeless people and wandering around the streets and dirtying the street. The only way we're going to attack any of these problems is to create more housing.
Richard, they don't want them here at all,
I know,
you know.
but they have to be
I
somewhere.
mean, they were saying, other places in the city, they were blatant.
Yeah. I mean, those are, I don't know. Hopefully
In
just,
any event, we don't have to decide any of that now, but I think, we ought to have maybe, I'm just proposing 3 people from our committee and 3 people from our committee, from the housing committee who are not on our committee or who are on both committees. And I
Absolutely.
would volunteer to be one of those.
I think we should look at all options.
I'm sorry?
I think we should explore all options.
Oh, absolutely.
and just Seema threw in the chat the fair housing plan from the city. I think that would be a really great reference document.
Yep.
Yes.
Keep in mind, inclusionary housing is more of a middle income, as much as affordable is very, very
Right.
with AMI.
Very,
Sorry, what was that, Doug? I missed it.
I just said that the inclusionary housing, the additional bonus that a developer gets, if they choose to go that route, is like in an 80-20, or it is arguable that it is actually still affordable.
I mean, in our neighborhood, it is.
I agree.
In like East New York, no. But, I think there's definitely a benefit in rich neighborhoods like ours.
yeah.
Oh, benefit for sure. I'm just saying, it's.
Yeah.
The only way this problem is going to be attacked in any neighborhood is in an incremental way. I mean, we're not going to build 200,000 units in the city. But every building that can contribute 50, 60, 100 units is making a contribution.
That would be a lot, but we should try to
Right.
aim for getting it.
Also, the other thing we need to do is look at what building sites there are that we need to help get funding for
Right.
so they can be maintained as affordable housing and not torn down and build, expensive housing.
You mean like SROs or just rent stabilized?
Well,
Right,
that's what.
So what I would suggest is Melissa and Louisa and I and any volunteers to join this group and Shelley and Roberta, and then one more person maybe from housing. And I'll try to get a date that's suitable for everybody to just meet and start talking about it.
That sounds
That'd
good.
be good.
And Richard, we should include in that conversation the remaining balance on what we call the collegiate money. That should be a
Yes.
part of that conversation.
How much is left?
I'm sorry, the what money?
We call it the collegiate money
Oh,
because,
right.
okay, so don't need to explain. There should be about $14 million left in that. Actually, Roberta, there was a proposal at one time to use a couple of $1 million for that in the 79th Street Project Find proposal, but apparently that was no longer needed. So I think we're back up to around 14 million. And it would be good for the affordable housing conversation to find a home for that before somebody decides on their own what they should do with it.
And we also, before that meeting, I will get some more information on a couple of the funding sources.
I think we also have to have a discussion about what it means, what affordable means.
Yes, because
And we were a little dissatisfied with the results on 96th Street.
exactly.
And,
Did we ever get the numbers in terms of 90, not Fetner, but the other project right on Broadway? I think we were waiting
the
for them
other
from.
project? No, I haven't seen anything.
There was one affordable apartment there.
Yeah, that one.
right.
But we
Yeah,
were
that
curious
one.
about how the numbers worked out between Riverside
We
Center.
never got a satisfactory answer, did we, Mark, from the borough president or from?
The borough president sent or Connor from the borough president's office sent a report over the summer that followed up on it. But it only kind of repeated what we already knew. We were hoping for an explanation other than what we all, or at least some of us thought was the case, which is that they were simply repurposing the collegiate money to satisfy two different affordable housing requirements, which the lawyer who made the presentation to us believes is a fair interpretation of how those two ULURPs came out. So.
I mean, our concern was that maybe they were double counting the,
That's right.
the
Yeah.
affordable.
They were, because they were part of the original Riverside South area, but they were building under the new Riverside Center rules that imposed different affordable housing rules. And they took the position that they could satisfy both by, with the same apartments, basically. And we never got a real reasoned response from the city as to what their views were on that. And
that's frustrating.
Apparently their views are that they agree with the developer because they haven't done anything. But it's, it's something we can look at. I think it's probably moot by now.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, we know enough to kind of try to be in earlier to
earlier what?
We know enough now to try to get in earlier and get more involved and protest.
We've always tried to do that.
I know.
I know.
It's
I mean,
very
as soon as
difficult.
we hear about a project, we usually contact the developer and all right. New York City housing. I think we probably should wrap that into our discussion of affordable housing, don't you?
Yes, then we should invite someone from the task force.
Okay, I actually think that NYCHA is different because what that is repair and maintain as opposed to creating affordable housing.
No, I think
it might actually, it may involve creating affordable housing if they sell air rights.
Or the infill.
Do infill.
That's true.
If I can point out that there was an RFP from the mayor a few years ago. I take a little bit credit because I promoted it at the Age Friendly Commission to do a different approach to the infill in NYCHA developments. And that was to have 3 pilots of creating senior housing, supportive senior housing with community facilities on the NYCHA land. And Wistfish, for one, did one in the Bronx. So there's one in Bronx, one in Queens, and one in Brooklyn. And the Millbank Terrace apartments are opening, and they serve, and so it's senior residents. The purpose was the aging population of the NYCHA end up being moved out of their 2 and 3 bedroom apartments where they raise their families to other areas which really uproot them from their neighborhood. At the same time, the apartments are needed for families. So by having priority to the seniors in NYCHA for the brand new, beautiful apartments on their land, it was not only acceptable to the people in the area, it was appreciated. And so those 3 are the only pilots, and they seem to be successful in many ways. So perhaps we can advocate for one in the Douglas houses.
Kelly, I think that's a fabulous concept. It kills several birds with one stone. Number one, it moves people out of oversized apartments that can be occupied by families.
Exactly.
It keeps elderly people in the neighborhood, and it also provides a mechanism for vacancy so that the city can fix up the apartments that are being vacated.
Mhm.
So I think it's a great idea. But Lisa, let's start out by discussing NYCHA along with the other projects, and let's see what happens.
Yeah.
I just want to caution us.
Sorry,
I was just going to say, I want to caution us against like planning for NYCHA without, I don't know, as people who do not reside there. And, you know, I just want to.
This is all preliminary. There's nothing, you know, before the board votes on anything or is even presented with anything, we're going to have all kinds of input. But I think we need to get our act together.
We need to understand we need to understand what the possibilities are.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, and Roberta had
Shelley?
commissioned.
Richard, if I can shout, may I, if you can hear me?
Go closer to the
There
computer.
are 2 big studies that the board has that I think are very controversial and require study. One is a question that I believe George James did of dealing with Amsterdam houses and transfer of air rights from Amsterdam houses. Secondly, there is a big study by RPA about a huge transfer of air rights within the district from Douglas houses. Personally, it's a respected organization, but I really think it requires an enormous amount of criticism. That, however, does not mean that we should not, with housing, look at the question of air rights, you know, from the NYCHA building, but it's always a question of who's going to be benefiting. And we really, at least I would say, I want to see the help and the needs of NYCHA, which after all are enormous. I want them to be addressed. But those 2 studies are available. They fall within both land use and housing, as well as the other points that were just made by Louisa and
Ethel, can you send me a link to those studies? If you
Sorry,
can?
just guys, quickly.
I have them. Okay, the RPA, a vice president from RPA addressed the housing committee
And the land
about-
use committee.
And
Already-
land use as well.
at the land use committee
Already happened. Yeah.
about that. And we also had George James speak to us also about his plans.
And
So
that
we
was,
have all that
what
information.
happened, though.
and both were joint with
Roberta on
land use.
this.
Both were joint with land use.
Yeah,
Right.
and Roberta was working with a group that was in turn working with George Janes, who has a couple of reports, one about Amsterdam, one about Douglas, and we still have money in the bank with him to do a presentation on those. But I believe
wait,
Roberta.
Right. So he did the presentation. A group of us were at it, and we decided that presentation that needed to have a further discussion Goddard was part of the group, and Ron Jones had agreed to, we actually were getting an urban fellow, thanks to Louisa, but fell through. We had an urban fellow, and then she got sick, or her family got sick, so we never finished that piece of it. To take it to the NYCHA residents, and that piece has fallen through. But I think when we have our joint meeting, we can discuss it, and
Yeah.
I can bring the two studies.
But that would have to be after the pandemic, when we
Do
pick
you,
that up.
That would be after
Roberta,
the, but I can bring you the information before then.
Roberta, can you send the information around?
Yeah, and also that urban fellow was my student.
No. Ethel.
Yes,
Yes,
she was.
was-
Yes,
Yeah, she was.
Yes, she was, and we worked on, and then she did do a different paper, but also about Amsterdam houses. Also, the guy from RPA did make a big report to the Citizens Housing Planning Council also, but it really, it's an interesting thing, but it really is a little facile, in my opinion, and not highly developed. It doesn't mean, though, that we shouldn't look at the two studies. I mean, the Douglas one is huge and has huge implications, and we really need to scrutinize it and to see about whether it really benefits NYCHA.
Richard, why don't we see the presentations when we have our little meeting? It's
I'm sorry, I
hard,
didn't,
hard to send them around without explaining what all the.
yeah. All right. Good. So I'll send around something for,
Thank you, Seema.
a meeting,
Sure.
and
Thank you.
we'll see where
I
it goes.
I just noticed actually that the RPA has a new report that just came out in August 2020 called Scalable Design Solutions for NYCHA. So it might be something else that we should
Yeah,
take
let's
a
look at
at.
all those reports.
Okay.
Let's see whether
Yeah.
we can come up with some kind of consensus. Probably not, but we'll try.
Or at least I don't know
RPA
about
does some
that,
very interesting research.
I'm
I
sorry?
think it'd be interesting to come up with a plan of action of how to proceed.
Yeah, exactly.
To involve all the stakeholders.
Yep. All right, the next item really is, I think, a fairly small item. There are some public spaces in the district that would be nice to use during the pandemic. Ethel, this was your idea. What is?
Yes. Yeah, well, there is a growing set of initiatives and actually literature by advocacy groups and others to be perhaps more creative about public space in various communities, and to be able to consider whether some public spaces can be beneficial to the community by having perhaps some either temporary retail or other kinds of structures that could benefit the community while not eradicating the spaces. I'm stating it in general, but there are a lot of different communities and others who are thinking about how public space now can be used to promote the health of people residing in certain areas where maybe the public spaces are not being used enough to benefit the people who are living in crowded housing, and in other places where there can be some innovative uses. I will send out a few of the papers and suggestions for proposals, and maybe that can then stimulate.
What's an example of a public space in
Thank
our,
you.
I assume you're not talking about indoor.
Right.
What would be a public
Well,
space
I'll
in our
send you
district?
some of that, and I think I have some with some of the examples. I'll send it. around.
Okay. All right, let's just, I don't think we need to do anything on this right now, but let's just look at it.
Right.
MAS has also done some interesting presentations recently on like, the use of public spaces to help small business and that kind of thing.
Yes.
It's worth taking a look at.
Okay.
Seema, thank you for reminding me because I have those and they did send them out and they are having some panel discussions.
Yeah.
Which did occur and can occur soon. So I will try to collect some of this and send them around.
All right, and I think,
Okay.
why don't we take a look at it before we involve other committees and, see if
Yes,
there's something
okay.
there.
Sure.
No, I was curious. I mean, do we have outdoor non-park public space? Because certainly when the restaurants were looking for places that they could set up, other than the plaza at Lincoln Center, I don't know of one.
Well, we have schoolyards for weekends, but
Those are parks.
those are
Not
already
all of
being
them.
used.
Not all of them.
Well, now,
And Broadway malls, although they're technically parkland too, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they are.
They are.
yeah. I mean, Ethel, send us what you have. Let's see if it's something we can get our
right.
arms
Yes, I'll
around.
do that. And I'll consult with SEMA because I think we have some of the same materials. Be glad to do that.
And try to get the volume on your computer fixed.
This is a whole new thing that's happened today. I'm embarrassed beyond belief.
It's the first time since I've known her that I haven't been able to hear Ethel.
I
All
upped
right.
my volume so I could hear.
By the way, just to add to that last item, BCI, before these street seats were approved, we did take a walk with some elected officials. I think Mark, you were there early on Columbus Avenue when we were eyeballing other spaces that could be used as an adjunct to for outdoor seating, that would be on the footprint of the restaurant and the back part of schoolyards and things like that. People could possibly bring their food and sit and use the space, et cetera.
All right. Next item, ongoing construction projects. Now, this is we have traditionally done a pretty good job, I think, of creating these community groups to oversee construction projects so that if there's too much noise at night or if there's overtime work or if there's some other obstruction or rats or something like that, we have eyes and ears on the ground and generally doesn't get to the board. The staff handles it, as I understand it. And Mark, is that?
Well, for the past
I'm sorry?
For the past 4 years, because of Penny's immobility, when I was chair, I did those tasks, those construction oversight. And in the early 90s, when the first Riverside South buildings were going, Penny and I chaired together. We had the first, anyway, and since Mark has become chair, Mark has been basically chairing those 2 or 3.
Well, Mark, I don't know if this is a steering committee issue or a land use, but are you satisfied with the way this is being done?
No, I'm not. I'm working on it. And there were some suggestions, for example, if Penny's not physically able to navigate the streets, that maybe John could do some of that. And to develop the relationships with the contractors and so forth. As you know, last week when some of us were briefed on an overnight after hours permit because there was a crane that was lifting girders into place for a cantilever building. And for some pretty good reasons, you're not allowed to lift heavy beams over an occupied building. And the Equinox Club on Broadway, 91st, 92nd Street was an occupied building during the day. And they swore up and down that it was quiet. And so I went up there at 1 o'clock in the morning, spent an hour and 15 minutes. And I got to tell you, it really was quiet. The sanitation and carting trucks were the disturbance on the street at that hour. But anyway, back to the point.
It was, by the way. I mean, I happened to look at Broadway from going southbound from 96th Street, and the traffic was backed up at least to 96th Street going
Yeah.
south. But
So
that's
there
a
are
temporary
issues
condition.
there. Yep, there are issues there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure those are ones that the construction oversight would ordinarily
No.
see, because that's traffic, not queuing trucks. And I asked the guy about where he queues trucks. Anyway, the question you were asking is, can we do a better job of that? And the answer is yes, and I'm working on it.
Okay, so there's nothing for us to do as a committee right now.
Not right now, but
Okay.
keep it on your radar.
I'd
Right.
like to point out on the 91st.
The last item that we have, there may be several soft sites, but there are two gigantic sites that are at some point going to see new construction. One is the Taconic site on 65th and West End. And we've been in touch with developers there. They're planning a medical research facility on part of that site. It's an enormous site. And they're planning they don't know what they're going to do with the rest of the site, but they have assured us that they're not talking about super tall buildings. They estimate that maybe they'll have a 24-story building or something like that. But in any event, they've proven very amenable to talk to us. And we just got a communication from them today or yesterday, and we'll follow up on it. We'll report status of whatever the status is. The second site is the Silverstein site on Columbus, which is the old ABC site. And it's my understanding that, and that site has the potential, according to George James, to be, enormous and just, really unconscionably enormous. And it's my understanding that Landmark West has initiated a request of city planning to put that block into the Lincoln Square Special District. It was carved out initially, but there's no logical or geometric reason why it shouldn't be in that district. And if it were in that district, it would go a long way to making whatever could be built there a lot more rational and tolerable.
So
I reached out to, I'm sorry?
Oh, I was just going to say, so for full disclosure, they're my client. So, I have a conflict, but have they expressed to you any plans to do development on that site that would make
No, in fact, just the opposite. We met with them too, and they're not, ABC has the site for the next 4 or 5 years at least.
Right.
So they're not about to dig, put a spade in the ground. But it seems to me, and Landmark West has been somewhat standoffish in terms of working with us or soliciting our help on the proposal. But I think we should at least have a discussion in our next meeting about whether, irrespective of what Landmark West thinks, we should be a little more proactive in that area and approach city planning and say, look, we're aware of this proposal. We think it's a good idea and the community board is behind it. Just let them know that we're there.
Well, I think the way to do it is the application is already moving through the first 2 stages, I think, at city planning. And that means that we should be able to contact them and do what you have said. I would not necessarily immediately say, okay, we want to support it, though I would suspect we might. But it's important for us to know what this proposed ULURP is in its specifics. There is a specific application which has been filed and which is in the very first stages, but making some progress within the staff at city planning. it's always helpful if a community board will support a ULURP application. And, you know, I mean, we may easily think it's fine. So I think we should at least be able to read and understand that particular application.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's a little.
Landmark, whose application is it?
I want to make sure that you know that, yeah, and Paige has now joined us, so maybe we can talk to her about.
Question for.
Just in time.
Ethel, is that the ULIP for changing it into the Lincoln Square Special District?
Yes.
Okay.
So Paige, I don't know how much of it you caught.
Enough.
But
Can I clarify, please?
sure.
All right. Landmark West tried to get a lot of interest involved in this, and there were no takers. And so about 2 years ago, we met with city planning, and they asked for our landmark wish list. And one of the things that we said, and Melissa, you and I have talked about this, and I know your Silverstein is your client.
Mm-hmm.
But when we were aware that 2 sites were being sold, West End Avenue and potentially ABC going down to Hudson Yards, of course, it's literally across the street from where Landmark West offices are. And we took an interest in it. And again, there were no takers. So we commissioned George Janes to study the impact. I helped with the zoning analysis with Sean Corsendi, our executive director. Several other board members participated in a list of questions that we wanted to meet with city planning. We did. They supported us to a point, but they had no money in which to initiate an action on their own. This is all public record. Everybody was happy. And frankly, DCP, this goes back about 2 years now, was quite happy that we start this. So George Janes is working on this. And just to let you know, yes, when the report is done and we have all the facts, because in fairness to Melissa and her client, obviously we haven't reached out directly to Silverstein. We're just looking at what the facts of this existing site could yield. And it will be a ULURP. There will be a time when the report is done, but right now it's half-baked. And there's nothing worse than coming up with an argument that is going to shoot us in the foot. So the thing is, yes, it's going to be great. You all know George Jane's capability. The community board has hired him himself, but we can't just launch into a very expensive report. We have to fundraise for it. So it's been slow. We haven't been able to meet because of COVID. You all know that. So I wish you wouldn't be so impatient and sort of kick Landmark West in the ass because you think we're holding information. Seriously.
Well, Paige,
we're
that's really
professionals.
probably
Wait a minute, Richard. I'm allowed to talk. I've listened to a lot of backtrap from a lot of people, and I'm getting kind of tired of it. Maybe it's because I'm working from home 24/7, and I respect my colleagues. I don't want to waste your time. Mark knows that we're working on this. Seema, when she was the chair, knew we were starting this. There was no interest at the time, and so we took the initiative. It will be ready soon, because eventually we need to keep things moving. We need to see our city grow. We want development. We don't want an empty site if and when ABC moves. So don't castigate people who are volunteering their services and working hard to do the work so that the community board has a full palette of information that you can draw from. There will be an ample time for you guys to criticize, review, suggest, just like any other consultant that might be working for the community board. In this case, Landmark West took the initiative. But
You
we
finished?
are working hard on your behalf. Trust
You
me.
finished?
Now I
You
am.
finished?
I now am. Thank you.
Okay. I find your remarks so completely incomprehensible that I don't know what to say. Nobody is castigating you. Nobody is criticizing your efforts. Nobody is doing anything other than offering to join in what you're doing. And as long as I've been involved, you have rejected those requests. So, what we're trying to do is figure out whether there's some way we can coexist because we have common goals. All right?
I'm going to share it with you as soon.
Listen to me.
Wait a minute.
Listen to me.
Guys, easy.
You apparently don't think we can coexist, and I don't understand why.
Richard, I say a couple of words. I think right now, they're working on something, and I think once that piece is finished, they're going to come to the board. But I wanted to ask you about something else. When you were talking about the site, we had created an ABC task force right after we found out that Silverstein had bought both sets of properties. We met with Silverstein. They couldn't have been nicer, and then they disappeared for a while. And then we found out that they had sold the site on West End Avenue between 65th and 66th Street. At that point, the Silverstein Group had been meeting with Goddard Riverside, with Lighthouse Guild, with some of the electeds, with us, and with DeRote and Wiska. And they had agreed that at the West End Avenue site, they would provide some community space for, I believe it was for Goddard Riverside. So it was very exciting to have that extra space. So I just want to bring that up so that that's part of the discussion when you're talking with them, and at some point, I assume you're going to start some kind of a task force to deal with with both sides.
Paige, what's your timetable?
We're waiting to hear back from George James. We've been putting a lot of pressure on him. He seems to be a little backlogged. I'm not blaming him. He needs data. He needs to talk to people. Our intention never was to withhold information. Yes, we need you to be a partner. That's one of the nice things about being involved in Landmark West, is that I have you, all 12 of you present tonight, or 11, because I see Richard's up here twice, being able to assist. This isn't something we're hiding under a bushel just because. It's just that when it goes public, I'm sure Melissa is going to take exception to some of the findings because she represents Silverstein. We want to put our best foot forward with all the facts and resume with you meetings with city planning when everybody has a chance to get together. But now's not the time.
All right, look, Paige, I think part of the problem is that we need to be, we need to know what your timing is, where you're headed, and when you think it's important for community groups like ours to get involved. I don't want to, we never want to undercut you or upstage you or any of those things.
Oh, I don't care about
All
that.
we want to
Richard.
do is help. And
I don't care about that. I want your participation.
I just wanted to understand why it was that you were discouraging us from getting involved now. And you explained that your proposal is not really ready. There's no formal, as I understand it, there's no formal application with city plan. There've been discussions.
Correct.
Right?
And,
Okay.
and you will be part of that. We're going to need everybody to make this happen. This is not a private affair. It's just that times are hard. I don't know. Tell you what, tomorrow I'll reach out to Sean, ask him to touch base with George, find out where we are, and we'll send it to, Mark, can I send it to you and you can forward it to the current members?
Sure.
That would be helpful.
But, again, what Roberta said is absolutely true. I sat in those meetings and the sites were divided and there was no indication, unless Melissa has other recent intel, I would suspect not, because Cranes would have picked it up in a heartbeat, that there's any action on that site. But
No.
we want we want it to go back. There's no what do you call it? We're not hiding the fact that when we met with city planning, we want to convince them to put it back in the historic district. It shouldn't be a carve out anymore. It was done for one reason, and that was to allow the movie industry, the TV industry to take that site. But when they go, we want it to revert back. And that's what we're working very hard to do.
I think we're on the same page on that in terms of the
Thank
final
God.
goal.
Phew.
Page,
Huh?
Yeah.
page and page.
See?
Shelley, sorry I beat you to it.
Good for you.
I'm sorry, it's been a long day.
All good.
So we're having our kumbaya moment.
I'm taking my hand down for the rest of the meeting. I've said my piece and I'm done. I just want to listen to good, happy thoughts.
Well, unfortunately, the happy thought may be an adjournment because I think we're at the end of the agenda.
Yeah, I
God.
promised,
I
I
didn't mean
promised
to ruin
Louisa
your
that it
night.
would be shorter than last night's meeting.
Please.
We still have a couple of hours to go.
Did last night's meeting actually end?
So if nobody wants to revisit the budget issues, I think we
Please.
can adjourn tonight. I'll be in touch with the various volunteers that we have, try to set up, initial planning meetings. Anyone who has information on NYCHA, air rights, or any other projects, try to circulate them, or send them to me and I'll circulate them. Look, the fact that we don't have any ULURPs doesn't mean that we can't be active as a committee.
Exactly.
Good point.
Richard,
Great.
thank you.
Oh, isn't
Thank
that
you.
resiliency application going to come to us soon?
The what?
The citywide ULURP for resiliency.
Coastal
You mean
resiliency. Yeah.
the flood?
It just got
Yes.
certified on
I'll
Monday.
report on that. I'll
So
send that around.
yeah, it's just one ULURP.
Okay.
Yeah,
It doesn't
the
really,
concern has
I don't think it really applies very much to.
There's
Yeah.
one building, there's one building in our district that'll be impacted.
We're raised, we're not in a flood zone.
Yeah, but it still
It's
goes
not that we're
through.
raised, it's a public park for the entirety of our waterfront,
Right,
With
but
the
it's
exception,
citywide
with
ULURP.
with the exception of one building at Riverside Center.
Right.
Everything comes around.
Bye, everybody. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good seeing
Thank
everybody.
you, guys.
Good
Take
meeting.
care. Thank you.
Again.
Bye.